So before I hand it over to Megan, I just want to say that tonight is really extra special because, of course, it's a bird who is here in our community, but also that our program coordinator and board member, Megan Ruman, was directly involved in Thor's rescue. So I think that's really great, very cool. So let's all enjoy learning about Thor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And luckily, tonight I'm joined by two of my coworkers who have been even more involved in Thor's story from when he was first found. So I also have my coworker Dale Stahlecker and Murph Bob Murphy. His nickname is Murph. Sorry, Murph, I totally messed that up because I never call you Bob. But we all work for a really small consulting company called Eagle Environmental, which Dale founded. It's based in Santa Fe, but we're all in different locations. So I let Dale, you can take it away.
Okay, well, I think that if Megan doesn't figure out when I want her to move a slide, we'll communicate. So yes, so many. I've been hanging around eagles so long that I named the company after them 30 years ago when we started it, so in 2011, Murph came to, or 10, I guess it was, the end of 2009, Murph came to Albuquerque working for the Fish and Wildlife Service. And he inherited me because I'd been contracting with the service, and Megan was just a twinkle in my eye at that point. We hardly knew each other. But so we initiated a marking program because golden eagles had lost some of their protections and things were changing. So and also it was a West-wide effort really. The BLM was involved. They had a big chunk of money at the end of one year that they gave. The state BLM offices each decided how to use, and the state BLM office in New Mexico gave it to New Mexico State, or had a contract set up with New Mexico State to do telemetry on golden eagles. So in 2011, we were trapping eagles around Nut and that area in relation to wind work in relation to this BLM NMSU contract. So that's how we got involved, and I think I need to follow the slides for a bit, and let's talk about what happened to Thor. Go ahead, Megan. And change the next slide, or am I not seeing it? Megan? There we go, yes. Okay. This is the windshield that Thor met suddenly one February day back in 2012 or 13. I'm losing track of time as I think about it. This eagle, to be known as Thor, was apparently feeding on a carcass right next to the road, and was startled by a fast-moving car going at or above the speed limit on that section of the road that you guys run up and back and forth to Deming on, and he flew up and he nailed this windshield. Went flying up into the air and splashed down, quite dead looking, I'm sure. The next person to come along picked him up, and let's see what happens in the next picture, Megan. Am I supposed to be able to move them and I'm not?
No, Dale, I think there's just a delay between you and I.
Oh, okay.
It's Dennis holding Thor.
Yes, so Thor Thor ended up at Gila Wildlife Rescue with Dennis and Denise Miller, and they were surprised to find out that he didn't have any findable injuries. He was they did X-rays, couldn't find any broken bones. He was alert. His eyes were clear. He suffered no serious major injuries. He thought he's a beautiful bird, but then they all are. He was released, and I think he kind of hobbled around for a while because that was a huge impact on a big bird, but a small bird compared to the size of a car. And so this happened at near the end of February when he was hit, and so it took him nearly a month to recover. Go ahead and move on. But many good pictures of Thor in his forced living quarters. He was, and then he started flying. Let's just kind of follow that. And somewhere along in there, next. A plumber got involved. And the situation was that I was home here in Santa Fe with my partner, Beverly, and she had just come home from a trip to California, and she said, we need a plumber. So there's something that we need to deal with. And so the plumber came, and we got to talking, and he said, did you see the story about the eagle that got hit by the car? And I said, gee, no, well, we didn't watch that news. So we went online, thank God for online, and we watched the story. And that particular winter, after the first winter marking half a dozen eagles in the nut area, we weren't having any luck catching new eagles. And so I contacted Murph, still as my federal contact, and he was the decider. And I said, how about we put a transmitter on this bird? And let's get away from the plumber. Let's look at eagles again. And so we talked about it, and we talked to Dennis, and everybody was in favor. And so late in March, the graduate student from New Mexico State and I drove to Silver City and went to Dennis's house and backyard and flight cage, and we proceeded to catch up this eagle. And go ahead. And this is the process of, there's Dennis in the background and a younger me on the working on something to do with the transmitter. You can see the transmitter clearly in the middle of his back. It's only 45 grams. It is attached with a Teflon ribbon, a narrow Teflon ribbon. And we worked carefully to get it to fit tight enough that it would not flop around, but loose enough that it would not interfere with his normal movements. And so after an hour or so of diligent work, we had Thor fitted with this transmitter. And I would add, and this is, if you look closely, this is Thor loose in the flight cage. You can see the transmitter and the antenna. But it's a little bit tight. Well, there was something I wanted to finish up with before I passed it back. I don't know what it was. So this is where the point where we get to where he was. Oh, I know what it was. Just that, I mean, and I maybe everyone knows the story, but looking back at that, we always give some kind of name rather than just the number. We quickly associate the number with a particular bird, but we do give them a name. And so I'm going to claim this one. I'm the one who suggested it. I said, why don't we name him Thor? He smashes things, doesn't he? and because of what he did to that windshield. So, so Thor was, I think, released in the next picture down at the end. Is it the end of the burrows, Megan?
Yeah, I believe it was. I don't know the exact location, but I think the southern boroughs.
Yeah, and we were hoping he would hang around, but he didn't. 3 days later, he was in Colorado. And I think this is where we transitioned to Murph. Is that right?
Yeah, so Murph, we can unmute you. Let's see. Okay, Murph, you're up.
Okay, thanks. Can I have the next slide, please? Well, as Dale mentioned, that the bird was released, Thor was released, and we were wondering if he'd be hampered, if he wouldn't, if he'd move at all. And the next time we received data, as Dale said, a couple days later, geez, the bird was already 60 miles away, and 2 days later is well into Colorado, and and the story unfolded after that. So this is an example, a really great example. 3 different years, migration cycles of this bird. That black dot right there is his wintering area that most of you are very familiar with. And I have a series of slides just dissecting some of these migration movements a little further. But here, based on the first 3 years that we tracked Thor, you can see the very regular use that aligns with the Rocky Mountain front, especially up into Alberta in particular. Year after year, a very consistent pattern. Really, the only place that Thor deviates is when he gets down here, from Wyoming into Colorado. Either stays right on top of the Rockies, not on the front, or passes through the west, through eastern Utah, and comes back home. So this is an amazing story, but I'll have to add that, as Dale mentioned, there's been a lot of effort in the last 12 or so years tracking golden eagles in the western part of North America the eastern birds too, by satellite telemetry. And Thor, this pattern is quite unusual that we're going to look at closely. But there have been several other goldens from the northern parts of Alaska that have shown the same migration route behavior and have overwintered. One of them I'll show you at the end as far south as central Mexico, several years in a row. Okay. So next slide, please, Megan. Okay, so I'm going to back up again a little bit here and just revisit the last few days. As I think Lisa mentioned up front, this was coincidental that Thor just returned for the 8th time now that we've tracked him, 8th year in a row, returning to his winter range. He just returned here the last couple days. So here he is passing from Colorado, overnighting and possibly some not really conducive weather, but spent some time here in a layover. And down, let's see, this is by Magdalena, just a couple days ago, roosted, and then arriving here in the middle of the afternoon on, let's see, what day was it? That was Wednesday. And this is an example. Just the red dots here are GPS fixes, and I'll back up for just a little bit here, and I won't go into this too much, but I just want to tell you that the transmitters that we use, the satellite transmitters, they send messages to the Argo satellite system, and every day we have a GPS fix that's accurate to within the size of your bedroom almost every hour, and that's what these red dots are. So the blue line here, that's the path that just connects those successive hourly locations. And this is just an example of what the data look like for this particular point right when Thor arrived, or just about when he arrived back on his winter range. So, you know, when he oops. Did I do that? Okay. Anyway, he was 3,400 feet above ground. The transmitter gives us that information, and it also gives us some idea of speed. Okay. Go ahead, please, Megan. Okay, so here's Thor arriving just a couple days ago. He dropped down. Here's the next hourly location. He was probably up in a soar. It's 500 feet above ground here at 2 p.m. And just that first 24-hour, about 24-hour movement period. Here he's using one of the transmission poles, you know, based on that location. And here he's using one of his favorite perches on an old windmill tower. And you'll see this show up again in other slides. So one thing I want to point out in these are Google Earth slides that I created, and it's interesting. It's confusing, but we'll go to the next slide, Megan. I'll show you here. That shows us better. Okay, so here's that old windmill tower, and what you're looking at right here is actually the shadow of the tower. The tower structure is really right here, and it's pointing straight up. So you only see it in 2 dimensions. That's why sometimes these locations look a little bit off. But that's the accuracy range, about 22 yards, and most of those GPS locations are well within that. So what looks odd here is there's this pile of GPS locations here because the bird spends so much time on this tower. There's probably about, there could be 18 or 20 GPS locations stacked up, many hours just spent here. Okay. Go ahead, please, Megan, to the next one. Okay. So one thing that we wanted to assess here, we didn't, as Dale mentioned, we didn't anticipate having a long distance migrant. That really wasn't a key part of the study objectives of this broader study we were working on. But it's been incredibly interesting. And one thing that Thor has shown is just this strong fidelity, faithfulness to the same spots on the globe, year after year. So here are two years represented. The first 2 years we tracked the bird, and I call these core areas. So if we look at all those GPS locations over several months, a couple thousand locations, if you think about, we look at the most densely packed 50% of those, the areas that are most intensively used. And so both years, he has a split core area. And this one is associated mostly with the transmission line. That's the road right there. And this is just a dirt road, a distance from the road. And this one includes that old windmill tower that we were looking at, and a couple other stunted tree perches. So really what's incredible about this bird is not only is it very faithful to the same spot year after year, as many of you know, hours and hours and hours on the same transmission, tower structure, but that's amazing in itself. But the other thing is that this bird, for a golden eagle, has an incredibly small home range and tight core areas. Most of the time it's within an area that's about 3 by 3 miles, unheard of. I mean, that's about the size of red-tailed hawk home range. It's amazing. Okay, Maggie, please. Okay, so this is just another look at core areas. Here's that first one we looked at, and you can see that red. If you can, the red encircled areas that is the core. And that's 50%, the most tightly packed 50%. And this, again, there's the power line in there. And then there's that area that includes the tower. And I think there's some small transmission line out there, but or distribution line, I can't remember. But anyway, and this purple contains 80% of the GPS fixes, and this area contains 95%. So, at any of those levels, again, just an incredibly small area of use. A small area in a relatively arid environment, providing everything that this eagle needs winter after winter for months. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so let's look at the migration. Here we're just revisiting what's happened this past year. So that's the spring migration. As I said, this is the, some of the spring migrations have gone through far eastern Utah and in western Wyoming. And here it is, the blue, just here the last couple of weeks, looping around through right over the top of the, the highest points, the 14ers of the Rockies, and settling in. So again, that really tight migration pattern. We talked about fidelity, faithfulness to a really tight migration route through Alberta, especially here and into the Yukon. Okay, and so what I want to talk about here now is the use of these different sites. So what's unique about Thor, and we have other colleagues working on golden eagles in Alaska too. This is really unique in that, he's had this pattern every year where he'll arrive at this area in far south, well, it's not quite southeastern Alaska, it's just over into the Yukon, and spends the late spring, summer there, and then moves up to a midsummer range, and then comes back here and stays for another month, and then heads back. It's fascinating. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just some really basic stats about, I'm focusing now just on this movement to this area that we call Haines Junction. You'll see here. So this is this past year. Here the blue being the fall migration. Leaving here second week of October, arriving 4th of November, and about a month also in spring. This has pretty much been the case, roughly a month to make this trip. Sometimes these birds will hit. What they're doing really is their strategy is just to wait for fronts and to ride fronts efficiently. That's what they want to do. But sometimes they'll get hit by a low and they'll just sit for a couple days. And so if sometimes these birds will have a layover of 2 or 3 or possibly 5 days in really bad weather, and then they'll get a high pressure and they'll just cruise for days. They'll just go up on a thermal, stretch their wings, and just ride it out for the rest of the day, until that pressure changes. So anyway, between this point and this point, a little over 2,400 miles. Okay, so distance spring migration, fall migration. This is pretty typical, eating up a few more miles by looping around here rather than this direct route. And on average, about 100 miles a day, pretty typical. Okay, next please. Here's an exception. This is his record travel. This is one of those jet stream days. 200 or 328 miles in a single day. That's incredible. And that, what also is interesting about that, sorry, the print on this is small, but that occurred in this last leg, getting close to the wintering, his wintering range. He just was yearning to be back home, apparently, on vacation. Yeah, very cool. Okay. Next slide, please, Megan. Okay. So this is the Haines Junction area. Actually, Haines Junction, a little town here of a couple thousand people. This is in the Yukon. It's right there. This is what, looking from Haines Junction out west, actually it's this highway out here. This is that stopover site that I talked about that he uses every spring and every fall when he comes back. And what's another thing that's really interesting about this bird, so when Dennis received this bird, it was in adult plumage already. So we know that now it's at least 13 years old. So we've been tracking this bird now for 8 years as an adult, and it has yet to show affinity to a breeding territory or show any kind of territorial defense behavior, which seems a little odd. So this is that stopover area in the spring. So, you know, if you're a long distance migrant eagle and you want to breed, you better get back there first. You got a couple thousand miles to fly, and you want to compete for breeding territory. And competition for good quality territories is fierce. And so, you know, he gets back there. You know, we know from one of our colleagues who works on eagles in Alaska, there are several territories in this area. And, you know, it's possible he's trying to find, every year, trying to find a vacancy in this area. He's roaming over just a huge area. You know, it's about 1,600 square miles, just moving and moving and moving and moving. And then finally, he breaks out of that activity, and he goes north for the rest of the summer. Okay, Megan, please. Yeah, so usually by the end of June, there's, you know, if he doesn't find and establish a territory by heck, the middle of April, late April, he's not going to breed. You got to act fast. So there's Haines Junction. That's kind of that cloud of activity we were just looking at. So what he's done now for 7 of the 8 years that we've tracked him is he's stayed in this Haines Junction, this stopover area for up to 2 months. Doesn't establish a territory, and then he moves way up here. This is in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, right on the north side of the Brooks Range, 25 miles from the Beaufort Sea. You know, it could hardly be any further north. So he goes up there, and he'll stay through the summer, sometimes well into September. And then he comes back to Haines Junction. Pretty much does the same thing, although his activity is not quite as frenetic, but he has this stopover activity. He'll be there for 4 to 6 weeks, and then he'll start his migration back. Okay. So this is that summer range. That's the Beaufort Sea right there, the Yukon line, and 3 successive years. The first year that we tracked him, second year, third year. You know, again, just I didn't use a home range analysis here, just the raw locations. You know, there's this first year, you know, his activity was quite dispersed compared to these others. But the main point is there's just strong, same thing. They're so faithful, strong overlap. He knows this area by, you know, like the back of his wing, hand, foot. And anyway, you know, familiarity is really important in raptors in terms of their survival. And, you know, even though it's 2,500 miles away, you know, there's huge security in this bird to relocate every year in the same area for the summer and molt feathers, eat well, and get ready to do it all over again. Okay, Megan, please. Okay. Oh, this was interesting. This is just the 10-day period. This is on his winter range again. There's a well-used site right there. What is that? But there's the transmission line right there. That's real obvious. But anyway, it just happened to be the 10 days right before he took off this year for Alaska, or for the Yukon, I should say. And just, you know, an increase in activity. I just thought it was really interesting. Okay. Oh, sorry, Megan. Okay, so this might be the last slide I have here, but this is the one eagle that I mentioned. A couple of our colleagues from up north, they trapped this bird on migration in Montana, and you know, it's interesting. This bird they tracked now for what, 4 seasons, and it shows it shows some of the same things that we've been seeing in Thor. Shows an affinity for riding right on the Rocky Mountain front through Alberta, but you know, it's wintering, you know, in west central Mexico, and it's spring and fall migration pathways are quite divergent. They're really disparate, you know, spread far apart. So on its return migration, it is not taking advantage of that route that Thor is so attached to. You know, it's traveling much further west. And interestingly, you know, this could be Thor's next door neighbor here through the summer anyway, right up here in the Brooks Range. So that's really, I think, all I have right now, Megan. If there's some discussion or lots of questions, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I'll go ahead and move on to the recapture section of this. Let me go ahead. So, meanwhile, back down in the Chihuahuan Desert scrub, roadside of Highway 180, where TVs and old mattresses go to die, somehow Thor is finding exactly what he needs to keep returning to the same winter range. Now, for a minimum of 8 winters. We know Murph said that we've only been monitoring him for 8 years, but he was already an adult bird. So he's at least 13 plus years. So we really don't know how long he's been returning to this wasteland of a place. So these transmitters have a life expectancy of around 5 years, give or take. And except for a couple brief times there were a couple years where he did have missing locations, I believe. You guys can correct me. And we thought the transmitter was dying, but it came back strong and it has continued to work well and give us these really solid migration paths year after year. But oftentimes, sometimes even the ribbons that hold the transmitter onto their wings, sometimes that even weathers and tears or snags on something and eventually falls off the bird. But this is just not happening with Thor. Dale did a really good job attaching this thing, but it's obviously not affecting his flight at all. But we decided with Thor's predictability of location, he would be a prime candidate to capture and remove the transmitter, since he's already provided us so much more information than we could have expected. So we thought, you know, he's done his job here. We have a lot of valuable information. Maybe we should try and take this thing off. So in January 2019, a group of us gave it a shot. We made sure first that we were looking at the correct eagle. So we used those locations that Murph downloaded, and we kind of pinpointed the specific power poles that he was hanging out at, and used binoculars or spotting scope to make sure we could see that antenna coming off of his back. So, and you can see this if you stop on the highway and look at a perched eagle on those power poles, you can catch a glimpse if you look really closely. So once we took note of that was exactly Thor and exactly what power pole he was on, the next morning, in the complete dark of the morning, and I mean really dark, it was all hands on deck, setting up the trap site before the sun rose. So there's a couple slides of what the setup is like. A net launcher is used that's activated by a remote control. The net needs to be really carefully folded and placed in the tray, which Dale's doing here, in order to avoid any snags or tangles on vegetation or rocks or anything. So then there are 2 lines running out from the trap site, or from the trap itself, and these are weighted to kind of keep things in line. When the net is launched from the tray, it should be spreading out evenly and far-reaching. So then all of this contraption is camouflaged as well as possible with hay or nearby vegetation. You can see we built kind of a teepee around the tray, and hopefully it's not windy and doesn't blow that down. That was one of our problems one day. And then we used a roadkill young mule deer Dale had in his freezer just specifically for eagle trapping. Always got to be prepared. We thought it would be irresistible, but once the eagle has settled in and begins feeding on the roadkill, you wait until the bird's head is down and remains down. You don't take any chances if the bird is unsettled and not quite fixated on that roadkill. So, but once it's down and feeding, you then hit the remote control and the net should shoot right over the bird, and then we would all run out as fast as we can to safely secure the bird and retrieve them from the net. So then you sit and wait and watch for the bird to even make the slightest move. We were all along the highway, along 180, just sitting in our cars, packed in there, watching through binos and scope and trying to entertain ourselves for many, many hours. So for the most part, we watched from about a half mile away, which is close enough for the remote to work, but hopefully far enough to minimize the disturbance. You don't want him being spooked by us lingering too closely. But then, like I said, also close enough to where you can run out of the car really quickly and get to the bird fast. So we had no luck, and we tried for 2 days with this attempt, but we enjoyed working all together. Dennis and Denise Miller joined us, and here's Dale, and we're also joined by Lizardo Cruz, who's a eagle researcher out of Mexico City. That was another treat to have him there. And we all loved it, but we were just eagle watching at that point. No eagle was caught. So that was in January of 2019 that we did that first capture attempt. So that was right in the middle of his wintering season. But Dale and I decided to try once again in late October 2019. So, and we had a different strategy that time. We wanted to be there as soon as he arrived at his wintering power pole. So again, with the help of those locations, those satellite locations that Murph downloaded, we knew he should be arriving within a couple days of about this year. In 2019, it was about October 25th, I think it was. And we thought, we are going to be there, make sure it's him the day prior, and then have the trap out there the next morning. He'll still be hungry from his long flight. So Dale and I got out there, and this time we tried a different tactic. I picked up a roadkill jackrabbit on my way there, thinking that would be a more regional and normal treat for him on his winter range than a mule deer out in the desert scrub. But again, we waited and waited, and maybe Dale even did some pleading and talking to Thor. At one point, something interesting happened. Thor moved closer to us and also kind of closer to the bait, but he wasn't at all interested in the bait. He was looking straight at us, and he opened his wings like this and held them like that for quite a while. And I've never quite seen this behavior exactly. It reminded me like he was in mantling posture, which is when the eagles have prey on the ground, they hunch over the prey and open their wings and kind of protect it from any other intruders, any other eagles or coyotes. And it kind of looked like he was doing that, but it was a different posture being up on the power pole. But yeah, looking at him, I thought, wow, perhaps he's just stretching out his wings and warming them after that long flight from the Brooks Range. So that's where his story stands today. And we need to take a moment to thank these collaborators. These are mainly Murph's and Dale's collaborators that they started the project with. As you can see, lots of collaborators with these markings of eagles. It's really great. And also, thank you to Dennis and Denise Miller of Gila Wildlife Rescue. I know many of you all know them, but none of this would have been possible had they not taken good care of this bird and rehabbed him back to health, and then released him. And they continue to do that with so many individual birds. It's just really inspiring. And I also should note that several of these photos tonight were taken by Dennis and Denise and used with their permission. So thanks to them. But so now we can answer any questions if you'd like. You can either type it into the group chat, if you can see that. You can either do that, or you can unmute yourself for the time that you're talking and ask the question that way if you'd like.
I saw the first one. Yes, it's true. Thor is in the 60,000 mile club. Just based on his migrations alone, he's flown at least 60,000 miles. Thanks for that. Somebody asked that question earlier. Or Dale brought it up.
And I see Emily. Hi, Emily. She says, is there any concern that Thor could eat carrion that has been poisoned for predator control?
Murph, do you want to take that as far as overall mortality?
Sure. There is some concern. We've been, just in a nutshell, we've been monitoring golden eagles all over the southern Great Plains, so just east of this area, and we've been evaluating or assessing mortality, causes mortality or survival, and we've had out of a total of 37 birds 37 that have died out there. There were 2 confirmed and possibly a third that died from what we believe were tainted carcasses. They died from actually an agricultural chemical, an aldicarb called Deming, which wouldn't be used for anything in this country. It's normally associated with corn and soybean agriculture, but it's highly toxic and to vertebrates. And anyway, so it's possible, but in general, out east of this area anyway, electrocution has been the number one mortality factor.
And I'll also add lead poisoning from lead shot from gut piles left over by hunters. So the move from lead shot to copper bullets is really needed, and I think it has some traction. It's happening. It's a slow change, but it's great to protect raptors. Let's see. So a couple people said, are you planning another recapture? Are we going to attempt to take off his transmitter? Dale, do you want to? We haven't even talked about this part yet. So Dale, do you want to?
I need encouragement. He's smarter than me. He's just not. We know how to sell, so we'd love to give him the freedom of it. I would want to say, as far as this was the second year we were putting out the 45-gram transmitters. We put out 150, 200 ourselves, and throughout the Western United States, it's around 1,000 transmitters. This one and one that we put out a year earlier, the very first 45-gram transmitter we put out in 2012, are still operating, and they're both. And the other bird also is one that we caught near nut that returns in winters across He wanders across the Gila quite extensively, but he's north of Nut for the most part. These early transmitters have lasted longer than many of these others, and so your average, if they're hoping we'll get 5 years, and some don't make a year, and others, these two are the longest running, 8 and 9 years we've been getting data.
And let's see, Anne, hi Anne Beckett. Any idea why he doesn't seem to achieve a breeding territory in Haines? And also she notes that the other Eagles route, Diego, his route showed that bird does not go to Haines.
Well, I could take a shot at the first question. It is unusual. The estimate, we have a better idea now, but we estimate that in general, about 20% of the breeding age adults in a given population, golden eagle population, don't breed, don't have a breeding territory in any given year. We call them floaters because, and you can see why that term would be apt for Thor. You know, when he's in the spring, when he's up there just wandering over this huge area, he's floating around. So, but in Alaska, we know, again, from a couple of our colleagues working up there, that it's much more difficult for birds to find a quality territory. There are territories around there that, you know, in the interior especially, that might have enough prey to support a breeding pair, maybe every 10 years. It's the snowshoe hares. They're really reliant on snowshoe hares in the interior. So it's not like New Mexico or Colorado or Wyoming where there's just this really, you know, generally a pretty steady prey source, and the you have territories where the adults they're on territory year round, you know, very solid. But it's a really good question, and we have you know, other colleagues that are tracking birds in the east that some are in Quebec, and they've been tracking a handful of birds for years, and those birds haven't bred either. So it you know, it's just so different, and we're not really sure. We need to really collaborate with the others in Alaska and just find out, you know, what % of these birds are breeding in an average year. Yeah, mystery.
Also, here's another question from Emily. Yeah.
Great question.
Do you know if Thor is a celebrity in Haines Junction like he is here? He has quite the fan base here. I personally, I don't think so. But Murph, is it Carol Alaska? Do you know if she shares this information at all?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they know Thor. The eagle biologists, the state and federal eagle biologists in Alaska know Thor well, and he's been able. We didn't really talk about data and the research itself, but what we've been doing is collaborating and pooling data from, like Dale said, in some cases hundreds of golden eagles across the West for, you know, what we call a meta-analysis, where, you know, so those Alaska biologists, they're using data from Thor. He was an oddball for us. We didn't expect him to get a long-distance migrant, but he's been really valuable. He's going to be really valuable in other studies already. You know, some of his data have been used in you know, published studies, some really good science. So he's already contributed. But, you know, Dale mentioned the other bird that is a migrant out of that group, and that bird spends the summer in Banff. And I did send an example of data and a little description to the Banff National Park folks, and I didn't hear back yet. That was like 6 months ago. I'm surprised, but that is a good idea. We should send something to the visitor center at Haines Junction.
There's nothing like a golden eagle celebrity. Like, people can really get behind it. I mean, people, what's not to love?
No, he's unique.
Well, I
Definitely.
also wish Lizardo was on the call. He was going to try to make it, but I was going to ask about species that are bi or even tri-national migrants and kind of what challenges that poses, because that brings up a whole new topic of we may be protecting their breeding range adequately, but what about birds that are wintering in southern New Mexico or Mexico? You know, it might pose completely different challenges, which can be really different, also considering different government policies. But I think that's also
No, that's a good, yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
Because we found a lot of those birds from the Four Corners, those young birds, when they leave home and they disperse, some of them go to Mexico.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, so they're, you know, just things we wouldn't expect, but there is a lot of exchange across the border.
Yeah.
It's a wide-ranging critter.
Well, anybody else? Thank goodness for Dale's plumber, right?
Right, exactly. The plumber was the key, or the leak was the key, and Bev saying, we got to fix this leak, otherwise we missed out on it.
Thank you, Bev. We would never know secrets if it weren't for the leak. Well, if anybody else? Well, I mean, if we do attempt more recapture events, I might end up hearing about it. Like Dave said, it's like we kind of got skunked. He looked at us and kind of threw up his beak and said, "No, I don't think I'm taking that," even though it was fresh food. But something about it, he didn't like it. But we may try again. At this point, it's not really covered under the funding anymore. So it's kind of like if we squeeze it in, we can do it. If we can get Dale and Murph to drive here, we'll go for it. But you'll probably hear about it. Ann says, how about the life expectancy? How long can they live?
So in the wild, 33, I think 33 years is the record, in captivity 46. But yeah, 33. There's a lot of them that live into their 20s, so he has time.
Yeah.
He'll breed one of these days.
He actually doesn't, his eye in some of these photos of him with Dennis holding him, his eye does not have that marbled look that I've seen in some adult eagles, which I know that it's not, I don't think it's an accepted scientific diagnostic for age, but I've learned over the years that possibly when they are much older, their eye becomes this like amber marble. I don't know if that's true, if that's truly a diagnostic of an older age bird. But his eye is kind of clear, like a young bird. It's not super amber marbly looking. But it just makes me wonder if he was a younger adult when you all put the transmitter on.
As in like a 6-year-old bird or something like that.
Yeah.
You mean young adult?
Yeah.
Young adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have mentioned usually for golden eagles, 5th year is considered adult age. You know, even though sometimes they'll breed in their 4th year, but 5th year is considered an adult. So that's why we came up with 13 years.
Yeah.
You know, he was at least 5 when he was picked up. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah. Plus he's from Alaska too, you know. But no, I know people have well, Dale's friend El Harmada has a keen eye for age and eagle eyes.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask this.
And Andy, I see you're unmuted. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why you're trying so hard to take this transmitter off of him. It doesn't seem to be doing him any damage, but he's still giving you good data. So why are you trying to do that?
Good question. Well, Dale, you went, he has, we're not, we're not learning anything new from him, I guess. And you're right. I mean, he's obviously doing very well. A minor part is that we have to pay fees. This still is being paid by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It costs about $600 per year to pay for the satellite services for collecting the data, the Argo satellite system. That's relatively minor, but I think that it's a foreign object, from some ethical standpoint. We just, he's more than paid us back. We just want to get it off if we can. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially if there's also sort of the fear if it does die and it's not giving any information, because we know that it will die probably in the coming couple years. It's already living longer than we thought it would. The transmitter.
The transmitter, yeah.
Yeah. But if it goes to not working, not transmitting any signal, and it just sits on his back, that poses a little concern. I think all of us would kind of be a little disappointed to know it's there but not doing anything anymore. And just him being such a localized bird in the winter, we know exactly where he is.
Yeah.
We thought it could be an easy fix, but it's just not proving to be.
Megan, I should add too, though, when we started the Four Corners research, a really important objective at that time was to document survival.
Oh, yeah.
And document natal dispersal. So we really needed to track these birds for as many years as we could. But since that time now, the work that we're doing now, when we attach the transmitters with those ribbons that Dale was talking about, we use cotton stitches at the central point so that cotton will rot, within a year or two. And when it breaks, all of the harness pieces they break at the same time. We call it a breakaway harness, because now we've satisfied those original objectives, and there's no need for us to put what we call a permanent harness on. For what we need now, the information now, we can get by with the breakaway harnesses, and thank goodness. Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Well, I think that might wrap it up if no one else has any questions. I loved everybody's comments. Thor for president. He flies straight and true. Never lies. Well, thank you all for coming. I think that was great, and I hope you all enjoyed it too. And
thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Murph and Dale, for joining me for this. It's been great.
Alicia and Mike.
Oh, they had one more.
Okay, so about Thor's attempt to breed, that's a good question because if, as I said, competition usually is pretty fierce for vacant breeding territories. These birds live a long time. The ones who have been breeding to a spot in Alaska, they get back there fast. The only reason, he could be trying hard, competing, but he has not remained, like we see our breeding adults elsewhere, he has not remained in one area for more than 10 days in a row. He's just constantly moving. So he could be scrapping every spring trying to get in somewhere, and find a territory where, say, the male had just died on migration back or something. But it's hard to say. But that's what we're going on. He's just not doesn't appear tenacious, or doesn't appear to have a really tight grip on a territory of any duration. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I can say it another way, 1,500 square miles is too big. He's looking and looking, and if he were to ever, we would feel better if he were to cut himself down, well, particularly down to the size of what he uses in the winter, but something much smaller. That says he's got territory.
Yeah, yeah. Good question.
Yeah, good question.
We'll let you know when that changes.
Yeah.
Another one question.
Oh, there's Andy. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that the transmitter could be inhibiting his breeding. Maybe it turns off the girls.
That's a good question. You know, we've years back, Dale and I and another person and some other folks too have have done some assessment of potential behavioral effects. But all we know is that there are many of these birds that are both males and females that are breeding with transmitters on, you know, for years. And the other thing that we've been concerned, of course, about just effects on survival. And we've analyzed the heck out of that too. And boy, if there's an effect on survival, it's subtle. We can't, based on all these birds we've been tracking and the survival analyses we've been able to do. But still, believe me, in the crowd, in the Eagle researcher crowd, there is constant consternation or concern about the possibility of these effects and just constant scrutiny. And yeah, it's worrisome, you know. But so far so good. Yeah, but we did think about that with Thor. You know, it's possible that could be an impediment. It might turn off the girls.
Well, that'd be a great reason to keep trying to get him free.
You bet.
Yeah, that is why we'd like to get it off. Wouldn't be a factor anymore.
Yeah.
A potential factor.
Yeah. Good point. Well, thanks.
Yeah, thank you all. Those are good questions too.
And a wonderful way to spend a Friday evening.
Yeah, I know. Talking about eagles is the best, so we did it right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. I'll end the program now, but thank you all so much for showing up and joining us tonight.
Thank you. You all take care.
Thank
Adios.
you.
See you later.
See ya.